Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10. Additionally, from December 12th, 2019 through January 27th, 2020, if you use this promo code, you will automatically be entered into a drawing to win a Theros Beyond Death Draft Booster Box. Also, there is another way to enter where no purchase is necessary. See the link in the description below for full details. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends with a Magic the Gathering news update for you today. We have a lot to talk about. There was an update to the Pioneer ban list. A couple cards are leaving that format. More on that in a second. Also, we'll look at the top 8s and some of the deck lists from the Grand Prix that happened in Oklahoma City last weekend, as well as the Star City Games Players Championship. And we got a few more product shots for some Theros Beyond Death products too. Quick reminder though, before we get into it, there is that promotion going on right now at Flipside Gaming. The details were at the beginning of the video as well as in the description below. But check those out if you want to find out how you might be able to win a draft booster box of Theros Beyond Death. And without any further ado, let's get into it. We'll look quickly at the Theros product shots. These are the theme boosters that we are seeing for the first time. And we also saw for the first time what the collector booster box is going to look like. Alright, on to that Pioneer update. These changes go into effect today and the next update won't be until January 6th. So 2 cards are banned. The first one is Nexus of Fate. Wizards mentioned that there's been high win percentages for those Simic Nexus decks, so this one catches a ban. And maybe no surprise, the second one is Oko Thief of Crowns, now banned in Standard, Brawl, as well as Pioneer. So the list is starting to grow when it comes to this card, but I mentioned on the Market Watch this past weekend, I anticipated this happening because those Simic food decks just looked really good over the course of the last couple weeks now in the Pioneer format. And yeah, they've been putting up some crazy results. Okay, on to the Grand Prix in Oklahoma City. This was a standard event, and here's your top 8. Jeskai Fires came in first, as well as 4th place. Jund Sacrifice came in 2nd place. Rakdos Knights came in 3rd place. Gruul Adventures came in 5th. Simic Flash came in 6th and 8th place. And Rakdos Sacrifice came in 7th place. So we're going to take a look at some of these deck lists in a second, but as you can see, generally, it looks like finally there's some diversity in the standard format. Too bad it came at this very late hour. Here's your first place Jeskai Fires deck. This one you might be familiar with because this deck has been around for a while. Initially it did well in the standard format, even during the time that banned Field of the Dead was a thing. However, as time went on and they banned Field and then the Oko decks really rose up, this started to get kind of squeezed out. But it's back again and it's a very good deck. Let's look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine that make this possible. Quite a few: Kenrith the Returned King, Brazen Borrower, Bone Crusher Giant, Fires of Invention of course, Castle Vantress, and Fabled Passage. In the sideboard, you'll find the Royal Scions and Mystical Dispute. Some other variations of the deck will also run Bone Crusher Giants out of the sideboard as opposed to putting all 4 in the main. I've seen a lot of times 2 and 2. Second place, Jund Sacrifice, another very popular deck. Now, this one has kind of risen to prominence ever since the Oko banning. As soon as that card was banned, a lot of pros got really high on this deck, and it's been extremely successful. And this deck also has a lot of cards from Throne of Eldraine. Let's take a look at them. In the main, you have Cauldron Familiar, Murderous Rider, Gilded Goose, Kovold Fakehurst King, Trail of Crumbs, Witch's Oven, Castle Thwain, and Fabled Passage. In the sideboard is Lovestruck Beast. Now this copy of the deck wasn't doing it, but most of the time you do find Beanstalk Giant in the main in these builds. Now here's a variety of other sideboard options. In some cases, these cards will be split between the main and the side. In other cases, these are just sideboard cards we didn't see in that second place deck. Murderous Rider, Wicked Wolf, Deathless Knight, Kovold Fakehurst King, and Epic Downfall. Here's the third place Rakdos Knights deck, and this is a very aggressive variation on Knights, and this is something that early on people thought was going to be a good deck, and it never really could take off. Oko, Field of the Dead really held this back, but now it has a chance to shine. Here's the cards you're going to find from Throne of Eldraine: Blacklands Paragon, Murderous Rider, Fervent Champion, Stormfist Crusader, Embercleave, Castle Thwain, and Tournament Grounds. In the sideboard, you'll find Bone Crusher Giant and Embereth Shieldbreaker. Fifth place was Gruul Adventures, so this was the variation of the Adventures deck that did the best in this weekend's GP. And of course, much like the Knights deck, there's a lot of cards coming here from Throne of Eldraine because they're really bringing this mechanic into the standard environment. Here they are: Bone Crusher Giant, Rimrock Knight, Edgewall Innkeeper, Lovestruck Beast, Questing Beast, Embercleave, Castle Embereth, and Fabled Passage. The sideboard brings us Embereth Shieldbreaker. Sixth place was Simic Flash, and this is a deck that's been around for a while now. It was good last season and continues to be strong, especially now that there's been the bannings in the environment. And some Throne of Eldraine cards have enhanced this deck, which we'll look at in just a second, but you can see your core cards here have existed for a while in the standard format. Frilled Mystic, Hydroid Crisis, Nightpack Ambusher, Paradise Druid, Nissa Who Shakes the World, so on and so forth. And here's your Throne of Eldraine cards: Brazen Borrower, Mystical Dispute, Castle Vantress, and Fabled Passage. Out of the sideboard, another copy of Brazen Borrower, Lovestruck Beast is here, 2 more copies of Mystical Dispute, and Kenrith's Transformation. Some variations of this deck will run Gadwick the Wizened and Frogify out of sideboards. Okay, 7th place was Rakdos Sacrifice, very similar to Jund's Sacrifice. Now, this version of the deck doesn't run Kovold like we saw earlier, but there are a lot of similarities, obviously. Let's go ahead and take a look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine that are here. Cauldron Familiar, Rankle Master of Pranks, that one's a little different. Also, Claim the Firstborn, another different card that you're going to find in this one. Witch's Oven, Castle Locthwain, and Fabled Passage. On to the Star City Games Players Championship, and a couple things to remember about this tournament. First off, it is a smaller event, so it's going to have a unique meta. Secondly, they are playing 3 different formats here: Standard, Modern, as well as Legacy. For a player to finish this high, those decks had to all do pretty well, but there could be a case where maybe one of the decks was performing super strong, one was a little bit weaker, and it got propped up a little. So here's your top 8 players, and this is what they were playing for Standard. First place was Simic Flash. That also came in 5th place. Second place as well as 8th place was Jund Sacrifice. Simic Ramp came in 3rd, 4th, 6th, and 7th. So let's take a look at some of the deck lists that we haven't already looked at during the GP segment. Here's the 3rd place Simic Ramp deck, and this has a lot of callbacks to things we were seeing last season before Throne of Eldraine entered the format. You're going to find things here like Cavalier of Thorns, 4 copies, 2 Arboreal Grazer, 1 Agent of Treachery, 4 copies of Hydroid Crisis in the main, 4 Leafkin Druid, 4 Risen Reef, 4 Nissa Who Shakes the World. So clearly, this was a deck that was tried and true last season, and now that the environment has changed without Oko, without Once Upon a Time, so on and so forth, a lot of people feel like this is just a really strong deck again, and in some ways, it felt like a safe bet for this type of tournament. In the main, you found Castle Garenbrig as well as Castle Vantress. Sideboard, Lovestruck Beast, and Mystical Dispute. Other copies of this deck, though, do different things. In the main, sometimes you find Brazen Borrower, Gadwick the Wizened, Mystical Dispute, and Fabled Passage. And sometimes in the sideboards, you might find Brazen Borrower, Gadwick the Wizened, and Frogify. We'll go beyond the top 8 to look at the 15th place Golgari Adventures deck, since we haven't looked at one of these yet. Obviously, the concept very similar to the Gruul one we saw earlier, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. But again, you're going to see a lot of cards here from Throne of Eldraine. And here they are: Foulmire Knight, Murderous Rider, Order of Midnight, Edgewall Innkeeper, Lovestruck Beast, Questing Beast, The Great Henge, and Fabled Passage. In the sideboard is Epic Downfall. Okay, let's move on to Modern. So here's your same top 8 players and what they were playing in the Modern format. First place, Bant Urza. Second and 5th place, Sultai Urza. Devoted Devastation then came in 3rd, 4th, as well as 7th place. Bant Snowblade came in 6th place. And Amulet Titan came in 8th place. So, Throne of Eldraine has had a pretty big influence on the Modern format. Actually, there's a number of cards being played from that set in these decks. So let's take a look at some of these deck lists. Here's your first place Bant Urza deck, and this is an Urza deck that's not running Thopter Foundry and sort of the Meek combo. This is doing something a little bit different. It's using a lot of cards from Throne of Eldraine, and this has turned out to be a very powerful version of this deck. Both this as well as the Simic version have been great over the course of the last season since Throne of Eldraine came out. So you see here, you still have your 4 Urzas. You're going to have things like Mox Opal, Arkham's Astrolabe, Metallic Rebuke. They're all here. But Throne of Eldraine brings us 5 cards in the main: Oko, Thief of Crowns, of course, Emery Lurker of the Loch, Gilded Goose, Witching Well, and Mystic Sanctuary. Second place was Sultai Urza, very similar deck, again, much like the last one, using a lot of cards from Throne of Eldraine. The black is going to give you a different option when it comes to some of your control elements, things like Assassin's Trophy and Thoughtseizer here in the main. Let's look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine. Oko, Thief of Crowns, Emery Lurker of the Loch, Gilded Goose, and Mystic Sanctuary. The sideboard has Drown in the Loch. Also, sometimes you'll find Drown in the Loch in the main, and sometimes you'll find Witching Well in the main like we saw in that previous deck. Mystical Dispute many times will be in the sideboard too. Third place, Devoted Devastation, tried and true Modern deck. You got your Devoted Druid, you got your Vizier of Remedies, you have your 4 Finale of Devastation there in the main. So why are we talking about this one today? Because again, you see a lot of cards from Throne of Eldraine, Oko Thief of Crowns yet again, Gilded Goose, and Once Upon a Time. Bant Snowblade, this comes in 6th place, and this is the most successful variation right now of the Stoneforge Mystic decks. 4 copies of Stoneforge Mystic, 1 Sword of Feast and Famine in the main, 1 Batterskull. If you go over to the side, you do have another option here with a copy of Sword of Fire and Ice. So that's basically your Stoneforge package there. And you have a lot of other control elements going on as well. Let's look at the cards from Throne of Eldraine. Of course, who else? Oko Thief of Crowns is here, and Mystical Dispute is in the sideboard. Some other variations, though, of this deck will run Mystical Dispute in the main, as well as Once Upon a Time. 8th place, Amulet Titan, another very successful deck that you're very familiar with if you play Modern. Primeval Titan, Sakura Tribe Scout, Azusa Lost But Seeking, Amulet of Vigor. But Throne of Eldraine has an influence here too. Oko Thief of Crowns, Once Upon a Time, and Caltagirone Brig in the main. Sideboard, Mystical Dispute. We'll go beyond the top 8 now with Titan Shift in 11th place. Again, another deck that's pretty familiar, has some similarities to the previous deck. 4 Primeval Titan, 4 Sakura Tribe Elder in the main. And yet again, we got some influence here from Throne of Eldraine. And that's just 1 card this time, Caltagirone Brig. 12th place was a 4-color Death Shadow deck, 4 copies of Death Shadow, of course, 3 Gurmag Angler there in the main, 4 copies of Street Wraith, 1 Tarmogoyf makes it in there. And if you look at Planeswalkers, there's a familiar face. Oko Thief of Crowns, also from Throne of Eldraine, Once Upon a Time, and Drown in the Loch. In the sideboard, Mystical Dispute, and another copy of Drown in the Loch. Alright, let's move on to the Legacy portion, and you might be asking yourself, is Throne of Eldraine playing a role here too? Actually, yeah, pretty decent role. So let's look at the top 8 first. 4-color Mentor came in 1st place. 2nd place was Bant Snow. 3rd place was Sultai Snow. 4th place was Hogak, that also came in 7th place. 5th place was Death and Taxes. 6th place, Bant Miracles. And 8th place, Golgari Depths. So a lot of variety here in Legacy too. Here's that 1st place 4-color Mentor deck. 3 copies of Monastery Mentor, 3 Snapcaster Mages, both in the main. You're going to find Jace the Mind Sculptor, just 1 copy though here in the main, 2 Teferi Time Raveler. So, what do we got from Throne of Eldraine? You guessed it, 3 copies of Oko Thief of Crowns in the main. 2nd place was Bant Snow. A lot of similarities here though from the previous deck, a lot of control elements, 2 copies of Snapcaster in the main, 1 in the sideboard. This time you get 4 copies of Icefang Kotal in the main, 2 Jace the Mind Sculptor, 2 Teferi Time Raveler, 3 copies of Oko Thief of Crowns, and Brazen Borrower makes its way in here too. Some copies of this deck will main deck Mystic Sanctuary too, this one didn't though. Here's the 3rd place Sultai Snow deck. Some similarities again, but some differences too. 2 copies of Leovold, Emissary of Trust there in the main. Also, bringing black in gives you access to things like Assassin's Trophy. There's 1 of those in the main. 3 copies of Bitter Blossom right in the main too. And let's go ahead and take a look at what Throne of Eldraine contributed. Of course, Oko Thief of Crowns and Gilded Goose this time. Questing Beast will also sometimes show up in these main decks. And Brazen Borrower sometimes in the sideboard. Hogak comes in 4th place. Good old Hogak, still alive and well in Legacy. And if you look at this deck, this has been kicking around for a while. Not a lot of surprises. It's got Hedron Crab, of course, Vegevine, 4 copies of each of those. 4 copies of Hogak, 4 Bloodghast, 4 Gravecrawler, 4 Altar of Dementia, 4 Bridge from Below. You kind of know the drill here. Let's look at what we do get from Throne of Eldraine, though. Just a couple of copies of Once Upon a Time in the main. Bant Miracles comes in 6th place. This is a deck that's been hanging around for a very long time, so I won't spend a ton of time on it. 3 Snapcaster Mage, 2 Jace the Mind Sculptors, 2 Teferi Time Raveler, all in the main. You also got 4 Terminus in the main. But what do we get from Throne of Eldraine? Of course we get Oko Thief of Crowns and Mystic Sanctuary. Okay, on to the 9th place is a Delver deck as we move beyond the top 8. And Delver decks usually do a little bit better in these type of tournaments. You usually see a couple in the top 8. This one's still performing very well, though, coming in 9th place. 4 copies of Delver of Secrets, 4 Dreadhorde Arcanist there, 2 True Name Nemesis, 3 Young Pyromancer there in the main. A lot of cheaper control elements that you see in that right-hand column there. Throne of Eldraine in the sideboard brings us Brazen Borrower. 12th place, we got a Grixis Delver deck. Basically the same idea, but adding a little black so you can do things like Gurmag Angler, for example. And Thoughtseizes, 3 copies of those right there in the main. So what do we get from Throne of Eldraine? This time we get Brazen Borrower in the main. Alright, that does it for today's video. I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comments below about anything we talked about today. But until next time, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible through the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page, as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.